Hi everyone. So for today's reading workshop, I'm gonna be reading The Shack by William P. Young. A little context about this book is that it tells the story of a family whose younger daughter go missing and like she's dead, but they're not sure about that. And it's like it deals with a lot of religious topics like God and the Holy Spirit that are represented as characters in the book. So I'm gonna start reading the first chapter and I hope you enjoy it. March unleashed a torrent of rainfall after an abnormally dry winter. A cold front out of Canada then descended and was held in place by a swirling wind that roared down the gorge from eastern Oregon. Although spring was surely just around the corner, the god of winter was not about to relinquish its hard-won dominion without a tussle. There was a blanket of new snow in the Cascades, and rain was now freezing on impact with the ground, frigid ground outside the house. Enough reason for Mac to snuggle up with a book and a hot cider and wrap up in the warmth of crackling fire. But instead, he spent the better part of the morning telecommuting into his downtown desktop, sitting comfortably in his home office, wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt. He made his sales calls mostly to the East Coast. He paused frequently, listening to the sound of crystalline rain tinging off his window and watching the slow but steady accumulation of frozen ice thickening on everything outside. He was becoming inexorably trapped as an ice prisoner in his own home. Much to his delight, there is something joyful about storms that interrupt routine. Snow or freezing rain suddenly releases you from expectations, performance demands, and the tyranny of appointments and schedules. And unlike illness, it is largely a corporate rather than individual experience. One can almost hear an unified high rise from the nearby city and surrounding countryside where nature has intervened to give respite to the weary humans slugging it out within her purview. All those affected this way are united by a mutual excuse, and the heart is suddenly and unexpectedly a little giddy. There will be no apologies needed for not showing up to some commitment or other. Everyone understands and shares in this singular justification, and the sudden alleviation of the pressure to produce makes the heart merry. Of course, it is also true that storms interrupt business, and while a few companies make a bit extra, some companies lose money, meaning there are those who find their loss of production or for not being able to make it to the office. Even if it's hardly more than a day or two, somehow each person feels like the master of his or her own world, simply because those little droplets of water freeze as they hit the ground. Even commonplace activities become extraordinary. Routine choices become adventures and are often experienced with a sense of heightened clarity. Late in the afternoon, Mac bundled up and headed outdoors to struggle the 100 or so yards down the long driveway to the mailbox. The ice had magically turned the simple everyday task into a foray against the elements. The raising of his fist in opposition to the brute power of nature, and, in an act of defiance, laughing in its face. The fact that no one would notice or care mattered little to him. Just the thought made him smile inside. The icy rain pellets stung his cheeks and hands as he carefully worked his way up and down the slight undulations of the driveway. He looked, he supposed, like a drunken sailor gingerly heading toward the next watering hole. When you face the force of an ice storm, you don't exactly walk boldly forward in a show of unbridled confidence. Bluster will get you battered. Mac had to get up off his knees twice before he was finally hugging the mailbox like some long lost friend. He paused, taking the beauty of a world engulfed in crystal. Everything reflected lights and contributed to the hidden brilliance of the late afternoon. The trees in the neighbor's field had all donned translucent mantles, and each now stood unique but unified in their presentation. It was a glorious world, and for a brief moment its blazing splendor almost lifted, even if only for a few seconds, the great sadness from Max's shoulders. It took almost a minute to knock off the ice that had already sealed shut the door of the mailbox. The reward for his effort was a single envelope with only his first name typewritten on the outside. No stamp, no postmark, and no return address. Curious, he tore the end off the envelope, which was no easy task with fingers beginning to stiffen from the cold. Turning his back to the breath-snatching wind, he finally coaxed the single small rectangle of unfolded paper out of its nest. The typewritten message simply said, Mackenzie, it's been a while. I've missed you. It'll be at the shack next weekend if you want to get together, Papa. Max stiffened as a wave of nausea rolled over him, and then just as quickly mutated into anger. He purposely thought about the shack as little as possible, and when he did, his thoughts were never kind nor good. If this was someone's idea of a bad joke, they had truly outdone themselves, and to sign it Papa just made it all more horrifying. Idiot, he grunted, thinking about Tony the mailman, an overly friendly Italian with a big heart but little tact. Why would he even deliver such a ridiculous envelope? It wasn't even stamped. Mac angrily stuffed the envelope and note into his coat pocket and turned to start the slide back in the general direction of the house. Buffeting gusts of wind, which had initially slowed him, now shortened the time it took to traverse the mini glacier that was thickening beneath his feet. So I have um, seen not the whole movie, but I have seen things about it, and also I have heard about this book. And it is basically the journey a, of an angry father who lost her daughter to a serial killer, trying to find like his way back to God. And um, I think if like if you're religious, you're gonna really like this book because at the end he does um, get his faith back and he heals from the hurt that he has been done. So I find that really beautiful and I really enjoy this book actually. So I recommend it. It isn't that hard to read either. So if you want to read it, go ahead. Thank you, and that will be all.